We have 4 eclipses in 2022 and they're all along the Taurus-Scorpio axis. It's not unusual for eclipses to follow the same series of signs. The Taurus-Scorpio axis has a lot to do with money, and Scorpio rules oil while Taurus rules agriculture. It's possible that these eclipses may signal agricultural, food, and energy prices becoming wildly unstable. Inflation will continue next year, and I really hope it doesn't reach the double digits. The big planetary shift this year will be Jupiter's change from Aquarius to Pisces, which actually takes place on the very last days of 2021. In traditional astrology, Pisces is one of the signs of Jupiter, the planet of growth, optimism, and opportunity. So that means that Jupiter is strengthened by this placement. And I do think that that's going to be a good thing overall, but with a big caveat that I'll explain in a second. The sign Pisces represents 3 different things: altruism, creativity, and healing. When Jupiter transits Pisces throughout 2022, we may all collectively experience some growth and renewal to our spiritual faith and our creative flow. More importantly, Pisces represents healing, and after many months of enduring a global pandemic, this world could use one big fat healing right now. The Australian astrologer Kelly Surtees wrote a post in June of 2020 about when she expected the pandemic would get better, when Jupiter, the planet of luck, enters the sign of Pisces. Given the symbolism, I would agree with her. It's also important to remember that when planets change signs, the effects don't happen immediately, like turning on a switch, but that they can take some time to develop throughout the transit. So let's look at some dates. Jupiter has already briefly dipped into Pisces in 2021 from May to June. So we already got a teeny tiny little taste of Jupiter's healing support during a global catastrophe. By late spring of 2021, the world had already developed and began distributing immunization therapies that drastically reduced hospitalization and death. The world began opening up again after intense lockdowns. It seemed like we were moving forward, but it did feel like we were backtracking somewhat when Jupiter went back into Aquarius in July. So let's look at some dates for when Jupiter is going to return to its beloved home of Pisces. Well, the official day when this happens is going to be December 30th of 2021. Again, it's important to remember that this transit takes time to develop, so it's not like everything's going to be fixed right away when this happens, but that things are going to get better throughout the transit, which will officially end by December 21st, 2022. So expect some steady and incremental improvement in global health throughout next year. While I think of Jupiter's transit in Pisces is really going to bring some much-needed healing, there is one big fly in the ointment, and that fly is called Skeat. Skeat is a really gnarly star located at 29 degrees Pisces. It's probably no coincidence that Skeat sounds like shit because it's an apt comparison. While Jupiter is a benevolent planet, its primary function is expansion. It makes things bigger, and that's not always a good thing. Jupiter is going to be on Skeat during the first half of May, and then again between late October through December. And dang, that's right during the United States midterm elections. Honestly, there's a lot of astrological crunchiness happening around there. There's a really nasty eclipse on November 8th. Mars is going to be retrograde and out of bounds during that time too. So next year's elections look really contentious and difficult for the United States. While we can expect some healing and better health in 2022, does that mean that all of the restrictions are going to be lifted by then? Well, I can't speak for the world, but in the United States, we're having our Pluto return between the years 2022 and 2023. Now, Pluto takes about 248 years to orbit the Sun, which means that unlike the Saturn return, no one's ever going to experience their Pluto return because people don't live long enough. It's possible to live long enough to experience your Pluto square. That's when Pluto makes a 90-degree aspect to its place at the time of your birth, and that usually happens as we approach middle age. However, countries can have birth charts too, and our country's birth began at the signing of the Declaration of Independence when we told England to piss off. So what can we expect when the US goes through its Pluto return? Well, just as the Pluto square is one of the midlife crisis transits, our country's Pluto return will be one massive identity crisis for this country. I would highly recommend reading Michael Luton's Vanity Fair piece from 2007, where he talks about this time we're in. Pluto transits bring crisis, transformation, and death and rebirth processes. Pluto transits are not freaking easy, because going through a crisis can suck. However, there's a higher side to Pluto. Pluto is a planet of regeneration. People who have Pluto strongly placed in their chart can be great healers. So our country is at a crossroads over the next 2 years. What this means is that our government, institutions, and even foundational documents might go through some type of transformation. This country may look very different after 2023. Pluto transits often bring on power struggles and issues around control. In other words, I don't see control letting up anytime soon. In this country, there may be elements from deep in our history that come painfully to the surface, and they're no longer good for us, even stuff that we may have thought we've all moved on from. There may be problems that maybe we lost track of that all of a sudden demand our attention during this transit. What will these changes look like? Perhaps calls for investigations, overhauls, and audits in our governmental institutions. Pluto is located in the United States' second house, which rules money and values. Our economy might go through a death and rebirth process with a fiscal crisis, which is then followed by some type of renewal. We may also collectively toss out values that no longer serve us in favor of new values. Having just claimed independence from British rule, the first president of the United States, George Washington, feared another form of tyranny may even replace that of a foreign monarchy. He was deeply concerned about his country getting gridlocked by a two-party system, and his successor, John Adams, was worried about the same thing when he said, quote, "A division of the republic with two great parties is to be dreaded as the great political evil." This sentiment may become increasingly salient over the next 2 years, though there is also potential to move beyond a two-party system into one with greater political pluralism. Talk about hitting the reset button. I think another possible manifestation of the US's Pluto return may be a power struggle between federal power and states' rights, which were carefully outlined in the Constitution because the founders wanted a system of checks and balances to avoid any future authoritarian regime. I can see a Fed versus Red tension mounting, where the federal government and federal institutions like OSHA may battle it out with the Republican-led states. I can see the power struggles involving taxes and tariffs, where red states band together to do their own trade outside of the Fed over the next few years. So yes, there are some things to look forward to moving into next year. We're also going to face a really intense time in the United States between 2022 and 2023. But there's an equally great potential that we can regenerate and renew this country in ways that it might desperately need. A great metaphor for Pluto transits is a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. When a caterpillar changes into a butterfly, it creates a little cocoon around itself, and then its body gets dissolved in that cocoon. If you were to open a cocoon in the middle of this process, you wouldn't see a wormy caterpillar or a beautiful butterfly. You would just see mush, no legs, no eyes, no wings. Somehow, during that process, the caterpillar reconfigures itself into a completely different creature, but its old self has to die off first before it gets reborn. Think of the next 2 years as the mush period. It's a time for growing pains. However, after 2023, when Pluto shifts into Aquarius and into 2024, we also have the potential to evolve into something greater. Thanks for watching. Luna and I sincerely hope that you have a wonderful next year. And we're putting out astrology videos all the time, so subscribe and you won't miss out on any of this goodness. Bye-bye.